Good afternoon. Welcome to the Foreign Press Center. My name is Mark Zimmer. I'm one of the media relations officers here. Very pleased to have you with us. We have two briefers today. The first is Jonathan Elkind, who is the Acting Assistant Secretary for International Affairs at the Department of Energy. Our second briefer is Ambassador Mary Warlick. She is the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary at the State Department's Energy Resources Bureau and also the head of the U.S. delegation to the IEA Ministerial. We're very pleased to have them both with us. We appreciate your coming. They will each make an opening statement, then we'll open it up for questions. If any colleagues in New York have a question, we'll call on them as appropriate. Thank you. Sir.
So good afternoon. I'm very pleased to be with you today to talk a little bit about the recent IEA ministerial meeting. As some of you may know, the International Energy Agency conducts a meeting at the ministerial level every second year. And so the timing of the meeting that took place on the 17th and 18th of November was well established by tradition, but it actually came at a very important time in several different regards. First, this is the first ministerial meeting that takes place under the leadership of a new team at the International Energy Agency. Dr. Fatih Birol is the new executive director, and his deputy, Paul Simons, have brought a new sense of opportunity and focus to the agenda of the IEA. I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. It was also a very important time in that the ministerial took place 2 weeks in advance of the start of the Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, COP21 meeting that is now underway in Paris. And thirdly, a significance that nobody would have wished for, the ministerial took place a matter of days following the tragic attacks that took place in Paris on the 13th of November. It was a time when the U.S. Energy Secretary, Dr. Moniz, and counterparts from across the world, both IEA members and non-members alike, felt it exceptionally important to be in Paris to continue with constructive business, forward-looking business, to figure out the energy agenda going forward. If I were to highlight just a couple of the outcomes before passing the baton to my colleague, I would note that, in particular, this was a time of focus on a new agenda for an international energy agency that is focusing on updating and modernizing its engagement, both with member countries and with non-members alike. Dr. Birol laid out an agenda that focuses on, first, opening the doors of the IEA even wider to countries that have not been members in the past. In that context, we were very pleased that Mexico formally indicated its interest to begin the accession process. In addition, 3 countries, China, Indonesia, and Thailand, entered into a relationship called association with IEA, which will be a closer continuous relationship building on very strong existing ties there. A second element of Dr. Birol's agenda is to build from the traditional strength in energy security, which has been the stock in trade of IEA since 1974, to not only look at oil security, which has been a traditional focus, but also at the very different challenges in the natural gas space. And a third area of focus under Dr. Birol's leadership will be in the clean energy and energy efficiency arena, where there is so much dynamism. And it's significant there that the ministers participating in the meeting 2 weeks ago concluded a statement that focuses on what the energy sector can do to contribute to solutions in the climate space. And there was a joint statement that was forwarded to the Conference of the Parties that is now underway. So those are the highlights from my perspective, and I'd like to pass the baton, as I said, to my colleague, Mary Warlick.
Great. Well, thank you very much, John. And let me just say, to add very briefly to what John has already well described, we believe the timing of this meeting at the start of the new leadership at the International Energy Agency with a new executive director, Fatih Birol, someone with long standing experience at the IEA, was a very important opportunity for ministers from all the member countries to hear directly from him about his priorities, precisely the areas that John has outlined. And also, I think for ministers to take a little bit of time to think about where the International Energy Agency goes from here, some 40 years after it was founded. And in that respect, as John has said, the expansion of and the deepening, really, of the IEA's engagement with non-member countries was something that had been highlighted by ministers 2 years ago. And so this proved to be a really important opportunity at this particular ministerial chaired by Energy Secretary Moniz for the IEA to show real progress precisely in that area. So we were, for the U.S., very pleased, as were all the other members, to be able to activate this association process with the 3 countries John has mentioned, with China and Indonesia and Thailand, and we're very much looking forward to additional progress being made by other countries such as Brazil and South Africa and India as well in continuing to deepen their engagement with the agency as well. So that was definitely an important and a very big outcome, as well as was mentioned, the formal submission of Mexico's application to begin the process of joining the IEA. So very good on all of those fronts. There were, and I don't know if the numbers were mentioned, ministers or very senior representatives from some 29 countries, as well as a wide number of accession and partner countries: Brazil, Chile, China, India, Indonesia, Mexico, Morocco, South Africa, and Thailand, who were all present. And there was also a significant presence of the Energy Business Council, which is a very close part of the IEA process as well, with representatives from some 30 countries, if I'm not mistaken. I will also add that as the IEA and the agency looks forward to working hard on some of the mandates that came out of the ministerial, one important area that we will want to see further progress on is taking a very close look at the budgetary long-term financial health issues associated with the agency. That's a particular issue of real interest to us in the United States. We believe the IEA is doing a great deal of really important work on so many different fronts, and this the close timing of the ministerial with what is now underway in terms of the COP21 in Paris was so important as well. But as the IEA, the agency, looks to expand the scope of its work, doing so in a way that where it has the necessary resources and that we're meeting those in a responsible manner will also continue to be important. So again, I think our view was it was a very positive and successful ministerial. There's a lot of work that lies ahead, but we were, as I mentioned, especially pleased that this was an opportunity where we were able to really welcome so many new countries into the fold, into the relationship with the IEA.
Okay. With that, we'll open it for questions. As always, please identify yourself and your outlet. If any colleagues in New York come to the stand, we'll recognize them. Please. Sorry, Doris.
Ni Xiaochun from Xinhua News Agency. My question is, could you explain why the IEA decided to accept China as an association country. And my second question is, could you say a little bit about China's role in the clean energy field?
So China is a very important partner, both in regard to the association structure that has been set in motion and also in collaborations around clean energy. In regard to association, the significance of China obviously goes to the scale of the Chinese energy economy, also to which is to say that engagement with China provides an opportunity for China to gain the benefit of closer, more intimate engagement with experts that work for the IEA Secretariat and also that participate in the many different committees and working parties that exist under the umbrella of the IEA. China has a great significance in what is going on in energy markets. It is the largest energy consumer, the largest oil importer, the largest coal consumer. So it is, in every respect, in all parts of the energy sector, a very dynamic player and one with which the IEA community, including the United States, wants to foster closer relations. In regard to clean energy in particular, China has made clear through the statements by the Chinese President Xi Jinping, including in a bilateral format with President Obama at the time of the APEC ministerial last year, and then again in the state visit in September. China has made clear that it is committed to a significant share of its total energy production coming from clean energy resources, specifically 20% by the year, I believe, 2030. This will be a huge undertaking for China, and in that regard, China both has things to offer to its partners in the global community, as well as things to benefit from that engagement. In terms of offering, China is an important partner in clean energy research, and a little bit later I'll make some remarks about a new engagement called Mission Innovation that is tapping that engagement with China. But also, China is looking for technology and policies and know-how that have been tried and tested in other countries and that can be applied in China to the benefit of the Chinese people.
And I would just add two other quick points. One is that when the IEA was founded 40 years ago, the member countries at that time represented a far bigger proportion of energy consumption globally than is the case today. And I think the inclusion of China and China's interest in deepening its partnership with the agency, as John said, is a real win-win for both sides. And with the inclusion of additional countries into the agency's activities, I think it's a real recognition of the changing scene of global energy consumption and trends today, and all a part of taking a hard look at what needs to be done to modernize the IEA to reflect current realities. I will also add that we're all very well aware too of China's upcoming presidency of the G20 next year, which provides a real opportunity for us in terms of the energy agenda to engage on issues that are of real importance to China and the region and more globally as well, and an opportunity for the IEA to work closely with China as it pursues its G20 agenda.
Let's go to the back, please.
Irina Gilevska, Macedonian TV. Can you tell us what do you expect as outcome from the conference in Paris?
The short answer is today I can't tell you specifically what the outcomes will be, but I can tell you what we hope for in terms of that structure. First of all, as President Obama made clear in his remarks yesterday, and as the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Energy, and other senior U.S. officials have stressed repeatedly, we view the Conference of the Parties as a critical opportunity for the global community to set in place a structure that both calls forth the commitments from individual countries, that establishes a pathway forward that can facilitate progressively increasing ambition over time. So a set of obligations that countries will put forward in the form of the intended nationally determined contributions, the INDCs, and then structures that will help to facilitate the successful implementation of those INDCs by each country. Now here let me mention the Mission Innovation initiative that I referred to a moment ago. Yesterday, President Obama, President Hollande, Prime Minister Modi from India, and representatives from 17 other countries, many of them at the head of state or head of government level, announced an initiative under which the participating countries pledged to double in 5 years' time their budgets, their resources available to support clean energy research and development. So it is a big, ambitious undertaking by the governments, but there is more. The logic of this effort is that we need not only to have more tools that are available that can help us to realize the low carbon, no carbon energy sector that we need in the future, but also not just the existence of the technology, but also the deployment of those technologies is terribly important. So in addition to the governmental element of this initiative, there is also a private sector element, a grouping led by Mr. Bill Gates that is referred to as the Breakthrough Energy Coalition. This is a grouping of, I believe, 27 different investors and industrialists from 10 different countries on every continent around the globe. And they have pledged patient, early stage commercial investments, the kinds of investments that we need in order to actually have the clean energy technologies of tomorrow ripen and mature. We're talking about investments that are high risk, but also high potential for very consequential impact, favorable impact going forward. So for those who are interested in more on this, please see the website mission-innovation.net, mission-innovation.net. And you can get all the details about this new initiative. Now I mention that because, to go back to the initial question, because one of the things that is clear is that the sum of the individual national pledges, these intended nationally determined contributions, the sum of those INDCs will not yield a trajectory on which we are moving toward limiting climate change to 2 degrees Celsius, as the scientific community has advised. We will, in addition to what is on the table in Paris in these days, we will need new technologies, new ambition, new opportunities to create solutions. And we think that there's a great deal of significance for the energy sector. Globally, 2/3 of our greenhouse gas emissions come from the energy sector. So likewise, the solutions have to come from the energy sector as well. So we view this, to wrap up, we view the climate talks that are underway now as having a great potential to put us on the pathway to a good start now and to better and better solutions progressively through the years ahead.
If I could just add briefly to that too, I mean, this huge and really landmark announcement, Mission Innovation, I think complements very well the work of the IEA. For many years, there are something like 6,000 scientists and experts from all around the world who have been working on technology collaboration programs through the IEA. And this is one particular area that the new executive director very much wants to focus on, and one outcome of the ministerial was actually renaming the cooperation in this area, technology collaboration programs, but also with a clear commitment to deepen and strengthen the work of all of these technology experts to drive home more solutions, better solutions on clean energy and energy efficiency. So John can speak more to this, but we certainly see a big perspective role for the IEA in working with Mission Innovation.
We'll go to the front, then the middle. Thanks.
I'm Michael Garaz with Argus Media. Actually, I'd like to learn something more about natural gas security and what the U.S. Position is on it, given that U.S. will become net exporter of natural gas next year. And the second related question is, with every IEA ministerial, U.S. domestic production of crude and natural gas has increased, and I know some of your partners within different organizations bring up the subject of U.S. restrictions on exports of these commodities. I wonder if it ever has come up in the most recent ministerial, and what do you normally reply?
First, in relation to natural gas security, I would say that the task and the challenges, the nature of the marketplace for natural gas is very different than it is for oil. And so the work that IEA agreed to inaugurate through the decisions of the ministerial, that work will focus substantially on information about the marketplace, best practices in terms of storage and other flexibility mechanisms and the like. It will not be a cookie cutter of what IEA does in the oil security space. You're right that the United States is expected at the beginning of next year to begin natural gas exports in the form of liquefied natural gas from the lower 48 states. This is a big development, and overall, the United States Department of Energy has approved for export to non-free trade agreement countries in excess of 100 billion cubic meters per year. So this potentially is a very considerable change in the marketplace that is being signaled right now. In general, the marketplace for natural gas has become more plentiful, more diversified, more competitive. And all of those features, we think, are positive. In relation to crude oil, first of all, it's important to note that the United States has, free export of, has unrestricted export of refined petroleum products, and we export in excess of a couple million barrels a day of gasoline, diesel, and other refined products. When it comes to the crude oil market, we are still a major importer, 7.5 million barrels a day of crude oil imports to the United States. So if you look at the analysis that has been done by the Energy Information Administration, for example, you'll see that the idea of removing the restrictions on crude oil exports, an idea that is circulating, for example, in the Congress, is not deemed to be something that would yield much impact in the marketplace. But nonetheless, the political process will and should continue to debate whether that's the right way forward for the United States.
Okay. Any other questions on this side, please?
Hi, Ambassador Warlick. Hello. So in view of these new climate change initiatives, what would be the recommendation to small oil producing states such as Azerbaijan, for example, which is where I'm from? What can they do to sort of go with the flow with this new, the new process that is taking place? And also, how would you assess what they're already doing in terms of adapting to the new world of climate change and the new initiatives? Thank you.
Do you want to go first? Or?
Sure. Yeah. Well, just comment briefly, and then John can add as well. I mean, we think it's critically important that all countries find a way to take significant steps forward to address climate change and to put forward strong and ambitious INDCs. The President has already spoken to this in Paris, as I'm sure you would have seen, and with the idea being that as time progresses, countries would continue to review their commitments with a view to making even more ambitious, setting even more ambitious targets for themselves. So there is obviously a very important role for a country like Azerbaijan to be playing in terms of energy security, and that is an area where we have been working closely with the government and other countries in the region, in particular on the southern corridor, southern gas corridor, as I'm sure you would well know. But certainly the energy security obligations and responsibilities of countries remain paramount, and that's an area of particular focus in the IEA. But at the same time, we would hope that energy producers and consumers as alike will play a real constructive and important role in addressing the climate change challenge as well.
I don't have much to add to that. I will say that exactly as Ambassador Warlick has underscored, Azerbaijan is not only an oil producer, it is also a natural gas producer. And if you look at the experience of the United States over the last decade, natural gas has played an utterly central role in driving down U.S. emissions of greenhouse gases from the energy sector. So there is an important role to be played there. Second thought, the traditional fuels that have been the source of energy security for many years now, we expect that they will continue to have a role in the marketplace. Our president has talked about an energy policy that is oriented around all of the above. And the idea here is that individual countries, or even within the United States, individual regions within this country, will make different choices about how best to deliver on their energy requirements. But we seek to have, to drive new technologies and to encourage their deployment across the marketplace so that those fuels, even if they are traditional, are used in a lower and lower emitting form. The classic example of this is carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration technologies for the coal sector, because we expect that coal will continue to be burned all around the world going forward. How to do that in a way that is friendly to the environment, that's the question that is on our minds.
Any final questions? All right, please, one more.
Are there any requirements for association members that you imagine? Any criteria based on which countries should or should not consider membership?
So the countries that have entered into this association structure have engaged in a long dialogue with the IEA. Ambassador Warlick referred to the decision 2 years ago at the ministerial meeting to to focus on developing the idea, developing the structure, engaging in dialogue with the potential partners about what benefits they seek from a closer relationship with IEA and what they are willing to do, what undertakings they would accept from their own side. We have focused on a number of different areas that are important features of the IEA's offerings, if you will. That goes to energy data and statistics. It goes to energy security concerns, including a closer relationship in regard to oil security, which has been, as I said, a traditional area of focus for IEA. It also goes to technology, to energy efficiency, and others. So there is a body of areas of collaboration that have been discussed between the partners and the IEA, and those are an interest and a willingness to participate in connection with those specific areas are the criteria that are used to determine participation in the association structure.
Mm-hmm. No, and I don't have much to add to that. Obviously, I think that there's a view that the association process or relationship with the IEA should very much be a two-way street, and that there's much to be gained, both on the part of IEA member countries from learning more about and learning lessons from non-member countries, but also in the other direction too, the kind of expertise that the IEA can help contribute, and the collective aspect too of the engagement and looking at some of the responses is also very important. I would add that we were very encouraged, in addition to the countries we mentioned who decided to formally activate the association process this time around, that is China, Indonesia, and Thailand, that India, Brazil, and South Africa also seem to be quite interested in moving that to that sort of level of relationship with the IEA as well. So we, and certainly our colleagues in the IEA Secretariat, will be continuing to work very closely with those interested countries to see how and when we might be able to take it to the next step.
Let me give one specific example that may make it a little bit more vivid. One of the things that the United States has always valued about the International Energy Agency is that it is an agency whose activities are grounded on energy data, energy statistics, and energy analysis. And so one of the most important elements of IEA's engagement with association partners is on the area of energy data and statistics, both in terms of helping to provide the capacity in the partner country to gather and present accurate, timely energy data, but then also a willingness to do that on a continuing basis and to make that information as a public good available more broadly. And so that's been a really kind of a critical foundation stone that has been one of the areas of core focus for association.
Okay, are there any further questions? All right, that concludes our briefing. Then we thank our briefers for their time. We thank you for joining us.
Thank you.